Hello, truth seekers and mystery enthusiasts. Today we're going to venture into one of the most chilling and perplexing cases in modern history, the Dyatlov Pass incident. A tale so strange that even after more than 60 years, it continues to baffle experts and generate new theories. Before we begin, I should warn you that this story contains descriptions of disturbing events and unexplained deaths. While we'll handle these details respectfully, listener discretion is advised. This is not your typical missing persons case or hiking accident. What happened on the slopes of the Ural Mountains in February 1959 defies conventional explanation. Picture this: a cold winter night in the remote Ural Mountains of Russia. 9 experienced hikers, all young and full of life, make camp on the slopes of a mountain called Kolat-Syakhl, which chillingly translates to Dead Mountain in the local Mansi language. None of them would survive the night, and the circumstances of their deaths would spawn decades of theories ranging from the plausible to the supernatural. These weren't inexperienced tourists who wandered off track. They were skilled outdoor enthusiasts, led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women, all students or graduates of the Ural Polytechnical Institute, now Ural Federal University. Seasoned hikers who had completed similar expeditions before. Their journey began normally enough. The team left Vizhai, the last settlement before the wilderness, on January 27, 1959. They were headed toward Otorten Mountain, a challenging but achievable goal for hikers of their experience level. The group was in high spirits, as documented by their diaries and the photographs they took along the way. One team member, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to health issues. This decision saved his life and made him a crucial witness to the group's last days. The remaining 9 continued their trek: Igor Dyatlov, Yuri Doroshenko, Lyudmila Dubinina, Georgy Krivonyshenko, Alexander Kolevatov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov. Their last known campsite was on the slopes of Kolat-Syakhl. On February 1st, they made camp, slightly off their planned route. From their diary entries and photographs, we know they were in good spirits, well-equipped, and prepared for a cold night in the mountains. What happened next has become one of the greatest mysteries in mountaineering history. When the group failed to return on their scheduled date, search parties were organized. What the rescuers found would become the foundation of countless theories, books, documentaries, and endless speculation. The first thing they discovered was the team's abandoned tent, still standing but cut open from the inside. Let that sink in for a moment. Cut open from the inside. Whatever drove these experienced mountaineers from their shelter that night was so terrifying that they chose to cut their way out rather than use the entrance. They fled into temperatures of minus 30 degrees Celsius, minus 22 Fahrenheit, or colder, most of them wearing only basic clothing, some even barefoot in the snow. The investigators found footprints in the snow, showing that the group had walked away from the tent at a normal pace. Not running, as you might expect if they were fleeing from an attacker. But why would 9 experienced hikers abandon their only shelter and protection from the brutal cold, leaving behind their boots, coats, and other survival gear? The first bodies were found about a mile downhill from the tent, near the remains of a small fire under a large cedar tree. Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonyshenko were found barefoot and wearing only underwear. The positions of their bodies and the broken branches in the tree suggested they had climbed it, perhaps to get a better view of something. 3 more bodies were discovered between the cedar tree and the tent: Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin. Their positions suggested they were trying to return to the tent when they succumbed to the cold. They were found separately, lying in poses that indicated they had been fighting to survive until their last moments. But it was the discovery of the remaining 4 bodies, 2 months later, that would turn this tragedy into something far more mysterious. In a ravine 75 meters from the cedar tree, under 4 meters of snow, lay Dubinina, Zolotaryov, Thibaut Brignol, and Kolevatov. Unlike their companions, these victims had serious traumatic injuries. Nikolai Thibaut Brignol had major skull damage. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov had major chest fractures that doctors compared to those sustained in high-speed car crashes. Yet there was no external trauma, no cuts or bruises that would typically accompany such injuries. Even more bizarrely, Dubinina's tongue was missing. The official investigation at the time concluded that the hikers died from a compelling natural force. This vague conclusion, combined with the Soviet authorities' quick classification of the case files, only fueled decades of speculation about what really happened on Dead Mountain that night. Let's examine some of the major theories that have emerged over the years, starting with the most rational and working our way toward the more speculative explanations. The first and most recently supported theory is that of an avalanche. In 2021, a Swedish-Swiss team published research suggesting that a delayed small slab avalanche could have triggered the events. They proposed that the group cut into the slope to set up their tent, weakening the snow layer above them. Later in the night, this could have resulted in a small but terrifying avalanche. This theory explains several key elements: the internal cutting of the tent, the group's immediate evacuation, and even some of the unusual injuries. The researchers suggested that the stripped clothing could be explained by paradoxical undressing, a documented behavior in hypothermia victims who feel irrationally hot in their final moments. However, the avalanche theory has its critics. Experienced local climbers maintain that the slope wasn't steep enough for a typical avalanche. The traumatic injuries found on some victims don't fully match typical avalanche trauma patterns. And why would such experienced hikers make camp on an avalanche-prone slope? The second major theory involves military testing. The Urals were a hub of Soviet military activity, and some researchers suggest the group might have wandered into a weapons testing area. Witnesses reported seeing strange lights in the sky that night, leading to speculation about rocket tests or other military experiments. Supporting this theory are the unusual injuries to the victims, which some compare to blast trauma. Several of the hikers' clothes showed traces of radioactivity when tested. Moreover, the quick classification of the case files by Soviet authorities suggests possible military involvement. But if it was a military accident, why wasn't there more physical evidence? No missile fragments, no obvious blast craters, and no other signs of weapons testing were ever found in the area. And would the Soviet military really have left the bodies to be found, rather than cleaning up all evidence of their presence? Then there's the katabatic wind theory. These fierce downslope winds can create powerful vortexes and generate infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that can cause panic and disorientation in humans. Proponents suggest that such winds, combined with the unique topography of Dead Mountain, created a, quote, perfect storm of terrifying conditions. This theory explains the group's panic and their orderly exit from the tent. They might have feared it would be blown away with them inside. It could also explain the strange lights reported in the area, as certain wind conditions can create unusual atmospheric phenomena. The infrasound aspect is particularly interesting. Studies have shown that exposure to these low-frequency waves can cause feelings of fear, anxiety, and panic. They can also induce chest pressure and breathing difficulties, potentially explaining why the group fled despite the deadly cold. But what about the traumatic injuries? What about the missing tongue? The wind theory, while explaining some aspects of the case, leaves other questions unanswered. We then enter the realm of more controversial theories. Some researchers point to the indigenous Mansi people, who considered Kholat Syakhl sacred ground. Could the group have been attacked for trespassing on Holy Land? However, the Mansi were generally peaceful, and no evidence of human attack was ever found. The UFO theory gained traction due to the strange lights reported in the sky and the radioactive traces found on some clothing. Proponents point to the unusual injuries and the apparent panic of the group as evidence of an extraterrestrial encounter. But like many UFO theories, it raises more questions than it answers. Some researchers have proposed the involvement of the Yeti or other cryptids. The remote location, the panic of experienced outdoorsmen, the strange injuries. These elements fit into the pattern of alleged cryptid encounters. But again, no physical evidence supports this theory. One of the more recent theories suggests that infighting might have played a role. Could there have been a conflict within the group? While this might explain some aspects of the tragedy, it doesn't account for the group's coordinated actions in leaving the tent, nor the strange nature of the injuries. Here's where things get even more interesting. In 2019, Russian authorities officially attributed the deaths to an avalanche and poor visibility conditions, but they specifically noted that the conclusion was based on the available evidence and that the case remains open to new interpretations as more evidence comes to light. What makes this case so endlessly fascinating is how each piece of evidence seems to contradict the others. The orderly departure from the tent suggests no panic, yet something made them flee into lethal conditions. The traumatic injuries suggest violent force, yet some bodies show no external trauma. The missing tongue could be explained by scavenging animals, yet why only the tongue? Rock and song. Let's break down some of the key pieces of evidence that any theory needs to explain. First, the tent cutting. The cuts were made from the inside, indicating the group chose to exit this way rather than use the entrance. This suggests either immediate danger or the perception of immediate danger, but not such severe panic that they couldn't cut methodically. Second, the footprints. They showed the group walking away at a normal pace, some wearing socks, some barefoot, some wearing a single shoe. This argues against pure panic and suggests they had time to make conscious decisions, however irrational they might seem to us. Third, the scattered clothing. Some victims were nearly naked, others fully dressed. This could support the paradoxical undressing theory associated with hypothermia, but it doesn't explain why some victims maintained their clothing while others didn't. Fourth, the injuries. The trauma to some victims was severe enough to be compared to car crashes, yet showed no external signs of impact. This suggests a powerful force that affected some group members but not others. Fifth, the radioactive traces. While slight, the presence of any radioactive material on their clothing requires explanation. Was it from secret military tests? Natural radiation? Something else entirely? Sixth, the group's experience level. These weren't novices who panicked at the first sign of trouble. They were seasoned hikers who had faced and overcome wilderness challenges before. What could have been so threatening that they abandoned all their survival training? As we examine these elements, we must also consider the historical context. This was 1959 Soviet Russia, during the height of the Cold War. The region was known for military testing, and the government's secretive handling of the case only added to the mystery. The Soviet authorities' quick classification of the case files is particularly intriguing. While this might suggest a cover-up of military activity, it could also have been standard procedure in a state known for its secretiveness. The files weren't declassified until the 1990s, and even then, some documents remained restricted. What's particularly fascinating is how the case continues to generate new theories and investigations, even decades later. Modern technology and research methods have allowed for fresh analyses of the evidence, yet we still can't definitively say what happened that night. The 2021 avalanche study, for instance, used sophisticated computer modeling to demonstrate how a small, delayed slab avalanche could have occurred. This kind of analysis wasn't possible in 1959. Similarly, modern understanding of hypothermia and its effects has lent credence to some aspects of the conventional explanation while calling others into question. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Dyatlov Pass incident is how it resists simple explanation. Every theory, no matter how well researched or plausible, fails to account for all the evidence. It's as if the truth lies not in one explanation, but in a perfect storm of multiple factors coming together on that fatal night. Could it have been a combination of events? Perhaps an avalanche or powerful winds drove them from their tent. Military testing created the strange lights they saw, and the rest can be explained by the terrible effects of cold and panic on the human body and mind. Or perhaps there's another explanation we haven't yet considered. As we conclude our exploration of this haunting mystery, it's important to remember that at its heart, this is a human tragedy. 9 young, vibrant people lost their lives on that mountain. Their families waited decades for answers that never fully came. While we may be fascinated by the mystery, we should never forget the human cost at its center. Igor Dyatlov, Yuri Doroshenko, Lyudmila Dubinina, Georgy Krivonoshenko, Alexander Kolevatov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Rustam Slobodin, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov were more than just names in a mystery. They were students, athletes, dreamers, and adventurers. Their story deserves to be told with respect for their experience and acknowledgement of their tragic end. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. It continues to fascinate us not just because of its bizarre circumstances, but because it reminds us that even in our modern world of satellite imagery and advanced science, some mysteries remain unsolved. Perhaps that's why this case continues to captivate us. It stands as a reminder that the world still holds secrets, that not everything can be neatly explained or categorized. In an age where we expect answers to be just a Google search away, the Dyatlov Pass incident reminds us that some questions may never be fully answered. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of one of history's most compelling mysteries. If you found this interesting, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this video with others who might be intrigued by this fascinating case. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes the most interesting questions are the ones that remain unanswered.